Talia Miller was always the life of the party. At 72, she had the energy of someone half her age, and her friends often called her the social butterfly of their community. She had raised 2 children, had 5 grandchildren, and had worked as a high school teacher for over 30 years. Even in her retirement, Talia kept a busy schedule, always organizing neighborhood potlucks, attending book clubs, and visiting her grandchildren every weekend. Life had been good, and she had made it a point to stay active, walking every morning, eating a balanced diet, and always staying upbeat. But that all changed one afternoon last fall when a sudden dizziness hit her while she was tending to her garden. It started out small, a slight lightheadedness that she brushed off as just a little exhaustion from the gardening. But when she bent down to pull up a weed and stood up again, she felt the world spin around her. Her legs wobbled and she had to steady herself on the fence. Just a bad spell, she told herself, but deep down, something didn't feel right. For a moment, she considered calling her daughter, but the dizziness faded, and she thought it was behind her. However, later that day, the sensation returned while she was making dinner. This time, her left arm felt weak, almost as if it wasn't responding properly. It was then that Talia knew something more was happening, and this wasn't just a passing moment. That night, her daughter, Lauren, insisted on taking her to the doctor. The doctor, after running some tests, explained what had just happened. Talia had experienced a transient ischemic attack, TIA, often referred to as a mini-stroke. At that moment, the weight of those words settled heavily in her chest. Her mind raced as she thought about her life and everything she had planned for the years ahead. The doctor reassured her that the symptoms were temporary, but they were also a warning. Talia was lucky this time, but a TIA is often a precursor to a more severe stroke. The doctor's words lingered in her mind long after the appointment ended. "Talia, this is your wake-up call." It was hard to absorb at first. Talia had always taken pride in being healthy, and now this sudden scare made her feel vulnerable, like she had lost control over her own body. But over time, Talia began to see the mini-stroke as a chance to take charge of her life again, rather than a reminder of her limitations. She started by making small changes, cutting down on the salty foods she loved, replacing her evening glass of wine with herbal tea, and carving out more time for herself to relax. But the biggest transformation came when she decided to reframe her mindset. She realized that living with intention rather than rushing through life would be her new focus. Talia took up gentle yoga, started meal prepping with heart-healthy ingredients, and began spending more time outside, appreciating the beauty of nature rather than hurrying through tasks. Her transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. She no longer worried about the future in the same way. Instead, she embraced each day with gratitude, knowing that her body's warning was an invitation to live more mindfully and fully. Talia's journey wasn't easy, but it was hers to navigate. And now, at 73, she feels more alive than ever. Talia Miller had always been the picture of vitality. At 72, she wasn't just active, she was an inspiration to her friends and family. Every morning, without fail, she took a brisk walk around the neighborhood, sometimes inviting her neighbors to join her, and she was often the one organizing community events. Her zest for life was infectious, and it seemed like nothing could slow her down. But one autumn afternoon, everything changed. She had been in the garden, her sanctuary, carefully tending to her flowers. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the leaves. As she bent down to pull a weed, a sudden dizziness hit her like a wave. At first, she chalked it up to the heat, or maybe the long day of work. She straightened up, hoping the feeling would pass, but as she stood there, gripping the fence for balance, the world seemed to tilt. Her heart raced, her vision blurred, and she could feel her legs turning to jelly. This wasn't just a simple case of dizziness. Something was wrong, but Talia brushed it off. After all, it was just a minor inconvenience. When the dizziness subsided, she continued with her day. It wasn't until later that evening, while she was preparing dinner, that she noticed another strange sensation. Her left arm felt unusually heavy, almost as if it had gone numb. She tried to move it, but the response was slow, and a sharp panic crept into her chest. She was familiar with her body, and this was different. It wasn't like the occasional stiffness or muscle fatigue she'd gotten used to. It was something more serious. Still, she didn't want to worry her family. She continued with dinner, but every movement felt more cumbersome than the last. It wasn't until her daughter Lauren arrived that evening that the gravity of the situation fully sank in. Lauren was immediately concerned, noticing how pale her mother looked and how slowly she moved. After a quick discussion, Lauren insisted they go to the doctor. Talia hesitated. She didn't want to make a fuss over what she assumed was just another age-related issue. But Lauren's insistence finally convinced her. At the doctor's office, the tests were quick, but the results were sobering. The doctor explained that Talia had experienced a transient ischemic attack, or TIA, commonly referred to as a mini-stroke. A TIA is like a warning shot, the doctor said gently. It's temporary, but it indicates that something more serious could be on the horizon. The words hit Talia like a ton of bricks. A mini-stroke? She'd heard of them before, but they seemed so far removed from her reality. She was active, healthy, and had always prided herself on maintaining a balanced lifestyle. The doctor went on to explain that TIAs are often overlooked, especially in older adults. The symptoms can be so fleeting, dizziness, weakness, numbness, that they can easily be written off as something trivial. But the truth was clear, this was Talia's wake-up call. She had been lucky this time, but a TIA often precedes a full-blown stroke, one that could have debilitating consequences. Talia left the doctor's office in a fog. The realization that her body had given her a warning she couldn't ignore was both sobering and frightening. She had spent her life helping others, taking care of her family, and staying active. But now she was faced with the harsh truth that her body needed more attention. It wasn't just about keeping up with the physical demands of life. It was about being in tune with her body and recognizing when something was off. And that realization was a hard pill to swallow. As the days passed, Talia found herself reflecting on the warning signs her body had given her. She had always prided herself on her health, but now she realized that there were things she had been ignoring. Small signs, like the dizziness that day in the garden, that she had brushed off as nothing. Talia was determined not to let this be the beginning of something worse. She didn't want to be a statistic, another senior who ignored the subtle signs of a stroke until it was too late. That night, after her daughter had left, Talia sat quietly by the window, the soft glow of the streetlights casting shadows across the room. Her thoughts swirled, but one thing was clear. She had been given a second chance, and it was time to make some changes. She couldn't afford to be complacent anymore. The next chapter of her life needed to be about awareness, self-care, and most importantly, about living in a way that would allow her to thrive, not just survive. And so Talia began to make plans for change, starting with her diet, lifestyle, and mindset. But Talia wasn't going to jump into drastic changes overnight. She wasn't one to rush into things. She had always been thoughtful and deliberate in her decisions. She knew that this transformation wouldn't happen instantly, but she was ready to take the first steps. After all, her future depended on it. The days following Talia's doctor's visit were filled with reflection. Every morning when she woke up, the weight of her new reality pressed on her chest. It wasn't just the mini-stroke that had shaken her, but the realization that the years of pushing her health to the back burner had caught up with her. For so long, she had lived life in a whirlwind, balancing work, family, and community events without truly focusing on herself. Now she had no choice but to face the fact that her health was fragile. The first thing Talia did was take a hard look at her diet. She had always prided herself on cooking healthy meals, but over the years, her choices had become less intentional. She loved her morning coffee, a couple of pieces of toast, and a quick salad for lunch. But dinner, it had become a grab-and-go affair, takeout, frozen meals, or just something quick that didn't require much thought. She realized that in her busy life, she had allowed convenience to take precedence over nutrition. With the doctor's advice in mind, Talia decided to overhaul her eating habits. She wasn't going to follow the latest fad diet or go to extremes. It was about making small, sustainable changes that would make a big difference. She began by cutting back on sodium, which she knew was a major contributor to high blood pressure. Instead of reaching for processed foods, she embraced fresh fruits and vegetables. Her grocery list now included more heart-healthy options, leafy greens, whole grains, and fish rich in omega-3s like salmon. The idea of feeding her body the fuel it needed to heal became her new focus. But it wasn't just about food, it was also about making sure her body stayed active. Talia had always enjoyed walking, but after her mini-stroke, she became more intentional about her movement. She began waking up a little earlier each day, donning comfortable shoes, and stepping outside for a brisk walk around the neighborhood. At first it was hard. She had felt so weak after the TIA, and the dizziness lingered in the back of her mind. But with each step, she felt stronger. The fresh air seemed to clear her thoughts, and soon walking became not just a physical routine, but a mental one as well. It was her time to focus, breathe, and take in her surroundings without the constant noise of her busy life. One afternoon, as Talia walked along the familiar path, her mind began to wander. She thought about the conversations she had had with her doctor, her family, and her friends. Everyone had been supportive, of course, but no one truly understood the depth of what she was going through. The fear that had gripped her after the TIA still lingered. What if it happened again? What if she wasn't so lucky next time? Talia realized that it wasn't just her diet and exercise that needed attention. It was her mindset. She had spent most of her life worrying about the future, always striving for perfection in everything she did. But now, after the scare, she understood that this constant striving had kept her from enjoying the present. Talia began to embrace the idea that health wasn't just about avoiding illness or staying busy. It was about balance. For years, she had been rushing through life, checking off tasks, and not pausing to appreciate the simple joys around her. But now, with her health in question, she was determined to slow down and savor the moments. The following week, Talia signed up for a gentle yoga class at the local community center. It was a decision born out of curiosity more than anything else, but she soon realized how much it helped her mental clarity. The breathing exercises and slow movements grounded her in a way that nothing else had. Yoga wasn't just about flexibility or strength, it was about quieting the mind and reconnecting with her body. After every class, Talia left feeling refreshed, not exhausted, but recharged in a way that she hadn't felt in years. As the weeks passed, Talia noticed a shift in herself. Her body felt stronger, yes, but so did her spirit. The tension in her shoulders had lessened, and her mind felt clearer. She was more aware of the foods she was eating, more mindful of how her body felt after each meal or walk. She wasn't just waiting for the next symptom or scare to appear. She was living in the present moment, learning to be kind to herself, and embracing the fact that she could control certain aspects of her health. Talia's daughter, Lauren, noticed the change too. One evening, as they sat together for dinner, Lauren remarked on how much more vibrant her mother seemed. Talia smiled, her eyes softening. It wasn't just the physical transformation, it was the internal one that meant the most. "I'm learning, Lauren," she said quietly, "learning to live in the moment, learning to take care of myself the way I should have all these years." Lauren nodded, understanding the weight of her mother's words. She had always admired her mother's strength, but now she saw a different kind of strength. One that didn't come from pushing through, but from being present, listening to her body, and making choices with love and care. That evening, as Talia prepared a light dinner of grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and quinoa, she felt a quiet pride within herself. She wasn't perfect, but she was on the right path. Her health journey had just begun, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was truly living, not just surviving. And that was enough. As the weeks passed, Talia's transformation became more than just a physical change. It was as though a new version of herself was slowly emerging, one that had been buried under years of busyness, worry, and external pressures. She had always been the one who kept everything together, her family, her friends, her community. But in the midst of caring for others, she had forgotten one crucial thing. She had to care for herself, too. One crisp Saturday morning, after another invigorating walk, Talia stood by the window, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of chamomile tea. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow over the room. It was a peaceful moment, one that she would have rushed past in the past, thinking of the next task on her endless to-do list. But today, she let herself savor it. As she gazed out at the trees swaying gently in the wind, a realization settled in her heart. This journey wasn't just about preventing a stroke, it was about rediscovering joy in the small moments. For years, Talia had been chasing perfection. She had prided herself on being the pillar of strength for everyone around her. Yet in doing so, she had neglected the very thing that had sustained her all these years, her own well-being. It had taken a scare, a brief moment of fear to open her eyes. She had learned that health wasn't about never feeling vulnerable. It was about learning to listen to your body, respecting its needs, and allowing yourself to rest without guilt. That shift in mindset wasn't easy, though. Talia often caught herself slipping back into old habits. There were days when the temptation to rush back into her old routine was overwhelming, when she felt the pull to organize another community event or host a dinner party. She loved the feeling of being needed, of bringing people together, but slowly she started to realize that those moments of true connection didn't come from constant activity. They came from being present, from sharing quiet, heartfelt conversations, not from being busy for the sake of being busy. It was a subtle change, but Talia began to prioritize herself more. One day, as she was walking to the park, she made a decision. She decided to take the long way home, through the quiet streets where the houses were set back from the road, surrounded by tall trees. She had walked this route hundreds of times before, but today, she noticed the little details that she had overlooked for years, the way the sunlight flickered through the leaves, the birds chirping in the distance, and the soft hum of the neighborhood around her. It was in these small moments that Talia found the peace she had been seeking all along. But it wasn't just her mental transformation that was evident. Talia's physical health continued to improve. Her legs no longer wobbled with weakness, and the dizziness that had once gripped her was now a distant memory. She felt stronger with each passing day, not just physically but emotionally as well. She realized that, despite the fear she had felt after the mini-stroke, her body had proven resilient. Her decision to take better care of herself had paid off in ways she hadn't expected. One evening, as she sat down for dinner with Lauren, her daughter noticed the changes in her mom, not just in her appearance, but in her energy. "You look different, Mom. Happier," Lauren said with a soft smile. Talia laughed, a genuine, unforced laugh. "I am, sweetie. I'm really starting to live for me again, not just for everyone else." Lauren nodded, her eyes filled with pride. She had seen her mother put everyone else first for years. Now she was seeing Talia embrace her own needs and desires. It was a beautiful transformation, one that made Lauren realize how often she too had put others' needs ahead of her own. She found herself reflecting on her own life and the balance, or lack thereof, that she had maintained. Dinner was quiet for a while, each of them lost in their thoughts. Then Talia looked up at her daughter, a sparkle in her eyes. "You know, I think I've finally figured out something important, Lauren. We can't pour from an empty cup. I've spent years trying to fill everyone else's cups, but now I realize I need to fill my own first." Lauren reached across the table and took her mother's hand. It was a small gesture, but it was a turning point for both of them. It wasn't just about Talia's recovery anymore. It was about redefining what health meant for both of them. Health wasn't just the absence of disease. It was about living with intention, embracing the present, and making space for joy, rest, and connection. As Talia finished her meal that evening, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Yes, the mini-stroke had been a wake-up call, but it had also been the catalyst for a much deeper change. It had allowed her to see herself in a new light, not as someone who had to constantly prove her worth, but as someone worthy of care, rest, and the simple pleasures life had to offer. And that realization was the greatest gift of all. Talia wasn't just healing physically, she was healing emotionally too. And as she sat back in her chair, looking at the family she had nurtured and the life she had built, she knew that her journey had only just begun. As the weeks passed, Talia continued to make strides in her health journey, but there were moments when doubt crept in. The old voice in her head, the one that had pushed her to always do more, always be more, would occasionally surface. Was she really doing enough? Would the changes she had made be enough to ensure her health was protected? Some days, she couldn't shake the worry that the mini-stroke had been a fluke and that the next one might not be as kind. One afternoon, while enjoying a quiet moment in her favorite armchair with a good book, Talia found herself reflecting on her old patterns. For as long as she could remember, she had always been the one to keep everything running smoothly. She had been the dependable one, the problem solver. Whether it was organizing family gatherings, leading the community book club, or helping her friends through difficult times, Talia had prided herself on being in control. It was a role she had played for so long that she couldn't even remember who she would be without it. But now, the landscape of her life was changing. There were days when she felt like she was walking a tightrope between her old self, constantly in motion, always meeting others' expectations, and this new version of herself, one that was learning to slow down and truly listen to her body. The changes she had made to her diet, her exercise routine, and her overall mindset were all positive, but they felt vulnerable. She wasn't used to taking time for herself. She wasn't used to allowing herself to rest without the nagging feeling of guilt that she should be doing something more. One morning, after her walk, Talia sat down with her daughter over a cup of coffee. Lauren had noticed the subtle shift in her mother, the way she seemed more at peace, more centered. But even Lauren, as supportive as she was, could sense the undercurrent of doubt in Talia's voice when she spoke about her health. "I'm doing everything right, Lauren," Talia said, her voice soft but uncertain. "I've changed my diet. I'm walking every day, doing yoga. But what if it's not enough? What if I slip up?" Lauren reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand. "Mom, you've already come so far. It's not about being perfect. It's about taking care of yourself in a way that feels right for you. You're doing all the right things. You're here with us. You're alive. And that's what matters." Talia took a deep breath, absorbing her daughter's words. She had always been the one to keep it all together, but maybe, just maybe, it was okay to not have all the answers. It was okay to embrace the uncertainty, to acknowledge that she couldn't control everything, and that wasn't a weakness. It was a form of strength. That evening, as she prepared dinner, Talia thought about the balance between control and surrender. The act of cooking had always been something she enjoyed, but now it had taken on a new meaning. It wasn't just about putting together a meal for her family, it was about nourishing her body with intention. She was learning that health wasn't just about what you did physically, it was about creating an environment for your mind and spirit to heal as well. As she sautéed vegetables and seasoned the chicken, she marveled at how much her perspective had shifted. There were days when the doubt still crept in, when the fear of another mini-stroke threatened to overshadow the progress she had made. But with each passing day, Talia grew stronger, not just physically but emotionally. She was learning that health didn't look like perfection. It looked like making space for both the challenges and the triumphs, the doubts and the confidence. The real turning point came one morning when Talia woke up early for her walk and found herself smiling before she even stepped outside. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't walking out of obligation or fear. She was walking because it felt good. She was walking to honor her body, to be present in the moment, and to enjoy the simple act of moving. As she walked through the neighborhood, Talia felt the sunshine on her face and heard the birds singing above her. The world around her seemed brighter, more vivid, and for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. It wasn't about avoiding future strokes or trying to be perfect. It was about embracing life in its entirety, with all its ups and downs. Later that week, when Lauren came over to visit, Talia made a point of sharing her newfound clarity. "You were right," she told her daughter. "I've spent so much of my life trying to control everything, trying to do it all perfectly. But now, I see that there's beauty in the uncertainty. There's beauty in just being." Lauren smiled, her eyes filled with pride. She had always admired her mother's strength, but now she was seeing something even more powerful, a quiet resilience, a strength that came from embracing life's unpredictability rather than fighting against it. As Talia sat back, her cup of tea in hand, she realized that the real transformation had been within herself. She wasn't just recovering from a mini-stroke, she was learning to live in a new, more balanced way. And that, she knew, was the most profound change of all. Her journey wasn't over, and there would still be challenges ahead, but Talia had found a new kind of strength, one that didn't come from pushing through every obstacle, but from accepting that life was meant to be lived fully and without reservation. As the months passed, Talia's approach to life became less about managing risks and more about embracing the simple pleasures of everyday existence. For years, her focus had been on staying ahead of the game, always planning, always striving, always looking for ways to improve. But after the scare of her mini-stroke, she began to see life differently. She realized that some of the most beautiful moments were the ones she had overlooked in her rush to accomplish everything. One crisp autumn morning, as Talia sat on her porch with a hot cup of tea in hand, she took a deep breath and looked around. The trees were turning golden, the air was crisp, and the scent of fresh earth lingered in the breeze. For the first time in a long while, she felt completely at peace. There was no agenda, no task she needed to check off, no event she had to prepare for. Just this moment, right here, right now. It was a small but profound shift. Talia had spent so much of her life focused on what was next that she had almost forgotten how to be present. Her mind had always been a swirl of thoughts, what she needed to do tomorrow, the next day, the week after. But now she was learning to let go of the constant planning. The mini-stroke had taught her that the present moment was all she truly had, and it was worth savoring. That afternoon, Talia took a walk through the park, a place she had passed by countless times before but never truly appreciated. As she strolled along the path, she noticed the way the sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. She stopped to watch a group of children playing, their laughter echoing through the air, and for the first time in years, Talia felt a deep sense of gratitude. She wasn't just walking for exercise anymore, she was walking to connect with the world around her. As she continued her walk, she thought about the small joys she had been neglecting all these years. Sipping her morning tea while watching the birds, listening to her favorite music while cooking dinner, or simply sitting in silence and letting her mind wander. These were the moments that made life worth living, she realized. It wasn't about the big achievements or the grand events. It was about the quiet moments of contentment that added up over time. Later that evening, Talia found herself in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal of roasted vegetables and grilled chicken. Cooking had always been a source of comfort for her, but now it was more than just a way to nourish her family. It was a way to nurture herself. She was no longer rushing through the motions, checking items off her to-do list. Instead, she was present in the act of cooking, taking the time to appreciate each step of the process. She let herself enjoy the aroma of the vegetables roasting in the oven, the sizzle of the chicken on the grill, and the satisfaction of preparing a meal that was both nourishing and comforting. As the meal was being prepared, Lauren came over to visit, as she often did now. She noticed how different her mother seemed, how much more relaxed, how much more at ease in her own skin. Talia had always been a powerhouse, but now she radiated a kind of calm that was new to Lauren. "You know, Mom," Lauren said as they sat down to eat, "you've changed. It's like you're finally taking time for yourself." Talia smiled, her eyes soft with understanding. "I guess I've finally learned that it's okay to slow down," she said, her voice filled with quiet wisdom. "For years, I was so focused on the next thing, the next event, the next project. But now I see that the best moments are the ones we don't have to chase. They're the ones that come when we just stop and appreciate what's right in front of us." Lauren nodded, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. She had seen the change in her mother, and it was a beautiful one. Talia was no longer the whirlwind of activity that she had once been. Instead, she was the calm in the storm, the anchor for her family, the one who now took the time to breathe, to savor, and to enjoy. The dinner that night was simple, but it was filled with love and laughter. As Talia sat back in her chair, she realized just how much her perspective had shifted. She was no longer measuring her worth by how much she accomplished. She was finding joy in the everyday moments, the ones that didn't require planning, the ones that couldn't be rushed. Talia had always been proud of her ability to take care of others, but now she was learning to take care of herself. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. And for the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace that she hadn't known she was missing. It wasn't about being perfect, about never slipping up, about always doing things right. It was about being present in the moment and accepting that life, in all its imperfect beauty, was enough. As the evening came to a close and Lauren gave her a warm hug before heading home, Talia stood by the window, looking out at the moonlit sky. She had come a long way since that frightening day in the garden, and though she knew there were challenges ahead, she felt ready. For the first time, she wasn't just focused on avoiding the next health scare. She was focused on living fully, on embracing each moment as it came, and on finding joy in the simple, everyday things. And that, Talia realized, was the true essence of health. Not just surviving, but truly living. As the year came to an end, Talia found herself reflecting more and more on the path she had walked since her mini-stroke. It had been a year of profound change, a year that had forced her to confront her vulnerabilities and rethink how she lived her life. What started as a wake-up call had turned into a journey of self-discovery. And while the transformation had been slow and sometimes challenging, it had also been the most rewarding chapter of her life. One winter afternoon, as she sat by the fireplace, Talia looked back on the changes she had made. She thought about the morning walks, the simple meals, the quiet moments of reflection that had become a part of her daily routine. These moments, which had once seemed insignificant, now held more value than anything else. She had learned to find beauty in the stillness, to appreciate the spaces between the busy parts of life, and to understand that there was no need to rush through it all. Talia had also begun to accept something that she had resisted for so long: imperfection. For most of her life, she had pushed herself to be flawless, to meet every expectation, to always be the strong, dependable one. But through this journey, she had come to realize that perfection was a myth, and that true strength came from embracing one's humanity. It came from being able to admit when things were hard, to show vulnerability, and to give herself grace. One evening, after a quiet dinner with Lauren, Talia found herself reflecting on how far she had come. She had always been the type to give advice to others, to offer support, and to be the pillar of strength for her family. But now she understood the importance of receiving care as well. It wasn't just about being the strong one anymore. It was about allowing others to care for her, to check in on her, and to remind her that it was okay to rest. As she thought about this, Talia realized that the journey she had been on wasn't just about health. It wasn't just about diet, exercise, or avoiding future strokes. It was about learning to live in harmony with herself, to find peace in the chaos of life, and to embrace the present moment fully. Talia had spent so much time in the past trying to control everything, trying to keep all the pieces in place. But now she understood that the key to happiness wasn't control, it was acceptance. Acceptance of herself, of others, and of life's unpredictable nature. The next morning, as Talia stepped outside for her walk, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. The cold air nipped at her cheeks, and the sky was a brilliant blue, dotted with wisps of clouds. She had learned to embrace the beauty of each day, no matter how ordinary it seemed. The simple act of walking felt like a gift, a chance to move, to breathe, to be present in the world around her. As she walked through the neighborhood, she noticed how the trees, now bare from the winter chill, seemed to stretch toward the sky, their branches reaching for something beyond themselves. Talia thought about how much like the trees she felt, rooted in the present, but always growing, always reaching for more. And just like those trees, she knew that there would always be more to learn, more to discover, and more to embrace. But for now, she was content to be where she was, to accept the journey, and to trust that no matter what, she was exactly where she needed to be. Later that day, Talia sat down with Lauren and her grandchildren for a quiet afternoon of games and stories. There was no rush, no agenda, just the warmth of being together. Talia watched her grandchildren play, their laughter filling the room, and she realized how much she had taken these simple moments for granted in the past. Life was so often about the big milestones, the events, the achievements. But now, Talia understood that the true treasures of life were in the small, everyday moments, the ones that could be easily overlooked if you weren't paying attention. As the evening drew to a close and the children headed home, Talia felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had weathered the storm of her mini-stroke, but in doing so, she had learned something far more valuable. She had learned how to live, not just to survive, but to truly live. And that, she knew, was the greatest gift of all. Looking out at the quiet winter landscape, Talia felt ready for whatever came next. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she didn't feel the need to control it. Instead, she was content to live each day with intention, with gratitude, and with an open heart. Whatever the next chapter of her life looked like, she knew she was equipped to face it, fully present, fully alive, and at peace with herself. Talia had come a long way since that fateful day in her garden when the dizziness first struck. In the months that followed her mini-stroke, she had slowly rebuilt not just her physical strength, but also her emotional resilience. There had been times of uncertainty, moments when she questioned whether she was doing enough to ensure her health. But in the end, Talia had learned that the key to her well-being lay not just in what she did, but in how she embraced the process. The lessons had been gradual, like the turning of seasons. Each small change, whether it was adjusting her diet, prioritizing rest, or simply taking time to appreciate the present moment, had built upon the last. And though the fear of another stroke never fully left her mind, Talia now viewed that fear not as a burden, but as a motivator. It pushed her to be mindful, to listen to her body, and to live with intention. One evening, after another peaceful dinner with her family, Talia sat on the porch, watching the last rays of the sun dip below the horizon. The evening air was cool, and the soft rustling of leaves provided a quiet soundtrack to her thoughts. It had been a busy week, filled with the usual mix of chores, visits with friends, and time spent with her children and grandchildren. But as she sat there, Talia realized just how much had changed. She wasn't racing through life anymore. She wasn't trying to keep up with some imagined version of perfection. Talia had learned to slow down, to be present in each moment, and most importantly, to be kind to herself. She had given herself permission to rest without guilt, to take breaks when she needed them, and to say no to things that didn't align with her new focus on health and well-being. It wasn't always easy, old habits died hard, but the more Talia practiced this new way of living, the more natural it became. The transformation wasn't just internal either. Physically, she felt stronger than she had in years. Her walks had become a daily ritual, a time for quiet reflection as much as for exercise. The yoga classes she had started attending had become her sanctuary, a space where she could connect with her body in a way that went beyond the physical. Through yoga, Talia had learned to breathe deeply, to stretch with intention, and to quiet her mind. It wasn't about pushing herself to do more or to be better. It was about being gentle with herself, about accepting where she was and honoring her body for the strength it had. As the months went by, Talia's family noticed the changes in her. Her daughter Lauren had always admired her mother's strength, but now she saw something even deeper, a quiet confidence that radiated from within. Talia wasn't just taking care of herself physically, she was nurturing her spirit, learning to embrace the ups and downs of life with grace. She was learning to trust in herself again, to believe that she was enough just as she was. One afternoon, Lauren came to visit and brought her 2 children along. They had been spending the day at the park, and Talia had been looking forward to seeing them. The kids were full of energy, running around the yard, laughing and asking Talia to join in their games. For a moment, Talia hesitated. Her body still wasn't as strong as it used to be, and she had learned to listen to the subtle signs of fatigue that would have once been ignored. But today, something was different. Instead of shying away from the playfulness of her grandchildren, she decided to join in. She stood up slowly, stretched, and walked toward them with a smile on her face. "Grandma, come play," her grandson called, holding out his hand. Talia grinned and took his hand, feeling the warmth of his little fingers wrapped around hers. As she crouched down to play, she felt a wave of joy wash over her. She wasn't just playing for the sake of playing, she was reclaiming something precious. She was reclaiming the sense of freedom that had been lost for so many years in her endless cycle of worry, overwork, and fear of what might happen next. And for the first time in a long time, Talia allowed herself to fully embrace the moment. She laughed with her grandchildren, ran with them through the yard, and felt a sense of joy she hadn't known in years. It wasn't about trying to prove anything or pushing herself beyond her limits. It was about being present with the people she loved and experiencing life in all its fullness. That evening, as the children headed home and Talia sat down to rest, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. The past year had been one of growth and healing, but it had also been a year of rediscovery. Talia wasn't just recovering from a mini-stroke, she was rebuilding a life that was rooted in balance, in self-compassion, and in the quiet moments that often went unnoticed. She wasn't waiting for life to happen to her anymore, she was living it. As she sat in the stillness of her home, Talia realized that her journey was far from over. There would still be challenges ahead, and she knew that her health would always require attention. But now, she felt equipped to face those challenges with confidence. She wasn't just reacting to life, she was engaging with it, with an open heart and a willingness to embrace whatever came her way. Talia closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in deeply. She was exactly where she needed to be, and for the first time in years, she felt at peace. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. She had learned to trust herself again, and that, she knew, was the most powerful thing of all. As winter transitioned into spring, Talia found herself standing at the crossroads of something much deeper than health recovery. This journey, one she had never expected to take, had transformed not only her body, but her entire approach to life. She no longer saw herself as someone just trying to avoid illness or manage her physical well-being. She had come to see her life as an opportunity to live with purpose, to share the wisdom she had gained, and to help others find peace in their own lives. It had been several months since her mini-stroke, and each day seemed to carry a new layer of understanding. Her morning walks were no longer just a form of exercise, but a chance for reflection. Each step she took felt more intentional, and the world around her seemed more vibrant. The trees in her neighborhood had begun to bloom again, and the flowers she had planted in her garden were beginning to sprout. It was as though everything around her mirrored the growth she had experienced within herself. One afternoon, as Talia sat on her porch with a cup of tea, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. The tension that had once defined her life was gone. She no longer felt the need to rush, to constantly achieve, or to measure her worth by what she had done. Instead, she felt the beauty of simply being, of sitting in the moment and appreciating the peace that had taken root in her life. Talia thought about how far she had come. Just a year ago, she had been afraid, uncertain of her future, unsure whether she could fully recover from the health scare. But now, she felt a quiet sense of pride in the fact that she had not only survived, but thrived. Her transformation had become more than just about herself. She knew she had to share her story, She had already made small changes in her life, but what if she could help others who were in the same position she had once been? As a mother, grandmother, and member of her community, Talia had always been the one to help others, to provide support, and to listen when someone needed guidance. But this time, it was her turn to speak up, to share the lessons she had learned. That evening, she called Lauren. She told her about an idea that had been brewing in her mind for weeks, a small gathering of women from her neighborhood. These were women who, like her, had spent much of their lives caring for others and had often neglected their own needs. Talia wanted to bring them together, not to offer them a list of do's and don'ts, but to share her story, to let them know that they were not alone in their struggles. She wanted them to understand that it wasn't too late to make changes, to live with intention, and to reclaim their health, not just physically, but emotionally as well. Lauren, as always, supported her mother's idea, and soon the small gathering was scheduled. Talia didn't want it to be a lecture or a seminar. She didn't want to preach or offer simplistic solutions. Instead, she wanted it to be a space for shared experiences, where each woman could talk about her own fears, her own challenges, and the lessons she had learned along the way. It was about creating a community, a network of support where women could learn from each other and offer comfort in the shared understanding of what it meant to grow older. The day of the gathering arrived, and Talia felt a nervous excitement. The women who came were all familiar faces, neighbors she had known for years, yet there was an intimacy to the gathering that made it feel like something new. They sat in her living room, the sunlight streaming through the windows as Talia shared her story. "I know what it's like," she began, her voice steady but warm, "to feel like you're running on empty, to put everyone else first and forget to take care of yourself. That's what I was doing, and I think a lot of us do that without realizing it. But we have to change that, not just for our health, but for our happiness." As she spoke, Talia could see the nods of agreement, the understanding in their eyes. They had all been there. They had all given so much of themselves that there was little left for their own well-being. Some of the women, like Talia, had lost touch with the small joys of life, focusing instead on responsibilities and obligations. But here, in this small space, they could all see the potential for something different. "I've learned," Talia continued, "that health isn't just about avoiding disease or checking off items on a to-do list. It's about how you live, how you choose to approach each day. It's about being kind to yourself, taking time for the things that matter, and finding joy in the little moments." The conversation flowed naturally after that as the women shared their own experiences. Some spoke about their own health struggles, anxiety, fatigue, the pressure of constantly trying to keep everything together. Others shared the emotional toll of caring for others without taking time to care for themselves. Talia listened, offering words of comfort and wisdom when needed, but mostly, she simply allowed them to speak. By the end of the evening, there was a quiet sense of camaraderie in the room. Talia could feel the shift in the atmosphere, an understanding that this gathering was more than just a conversation. It was the beginning of something new, a new sense of purpose, a new way of thinking about health and life. As the women began to leave, Talia felt a warmth in her heart. She had helped create something meaningful, a space for healing, for connection, and for growth. This was her gift to them, but also it was a gift to herself. Sharing her journey had been a way to give back, to contribute to something greater than herself. That night, as Talia sat alone with her thoughts, she realized that this was the next chapter of her life. It wasn't about avoiding illness. It wasn't even just about living in the moment. It was about making the most of every opportunity to grow, to connect, and to help others on their own journeys. In sharing her story, Talia had found her voice again, and she knew that this was just the beginning. She had a purpose now, one that went beyond surviving, beyond managing her health. It was about living fully, about sharing what she had learned, and about helping others do the same. And that, Talia knew, was the true meaning of healing. As the weeks passed since the gathering, Talia felt a deep sense of fulfillment she hadn't experienced before. Something had shifted within her that evening as she shared her story with her neighbors. They had listened, offered their own insights, and in turn had given her the gift of connection. It was a reminder that while health may begin with personal responsibility, it thrives within the context of community. The support, the shared understanding, and the collective wisdom had nourished her spirit just as much as the changes she had made to her body. In the months that followed, Talia continued her daily routines, her walks, her yoga, and her mindful meals. But now they were accompanied by a new commitment, a deeper sense of involvement in the lives of those around her. She realized that one of the greatest sources of joy she had in her life wasn't found in solitary moments of reflection, but in the community she had always been a part of. The mini-stroke had taught her that in ways she hadn't fully understood before, she couldn't live life entirely in isolation. She needed to be a part of something larger than herself. One of the first things Talia did after the gathering was invite a few of the women back to her home for a regular health circle. They would meet once a month, gathering to share how they were progressing in their own journeys, offering advice, and most importantly, providing emotional support. It wasn't about strict dieting or intense fitness regimens. It was about showing up for each other, being accountable, and above all, listening. At the first health circle meeting, Talia was overwhelmed by the warmth in the room. The conversations flowed easily, and the sense of camaraderie was palpable. Women who had once kept their struggles to themselves now shared their fears, their triumphs, and even their setbacks. They celebrated small victories. One woman had taken up gardening again after years of letting it go. Another had started attending a local walking group. They also acknowledged the harder moments, like dealing with anxiety or pushing through the days when motivation was low. It was a space of honesty and vulnerability, and Talia realized just how much she had missed this kind of connection. Life had a way of pulling people apart, especially as they aged. Children grew up, families scattered, and sometimes the busy pace of life made it harder to maintain close relationships. But this health circle brought something back into her life that she hadn't realized she had lost: the sense of belonging to a shared experience. They weren't just neighbors, they were women, all at different points in their journeys, coming together to learn, grow, and heal. For Talia, the circle became not just a way to give back, but a way to deepen her own growth. The act of listening to others, offering support, and hearing their stories helped her process her own emotions and challenges. It kept her grounded in the understanding that she was never truly alone in her struggles. The healing was collective. Talia's perspective on giving had also shifted. She had always believed that to help others, she had to be strong and independent, never relying on anyone. But now she understood that giving wasn't about perfection or about having all the answers. Sometimes the best way to give was simply to show up, to offer a listening ear, or to share your own vulnerability. She began to open herself up to receiving help too, whether it was Lauren offering to help with the grocery shopping or a neighbor dropping off a homemade casserole after a long day. Talia had always been the one to give, but now she was learning to accept the kindness of others without guilt. It was a beautiful exchange, one that didn't require strength, but trust and love. Talia also found herself becoming more involved in other aspects of her community. She had always volunteered, organizing events, and helping out where needed, but now she did it with a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer just filling a role for the sake of keeping busy. Every event she organized, every small gesture she made, was rooted in a deeper understanding of connection and the importance of uplifting one another. She didn't just want to be the busy one anymore. She wanted to be the one who made people feel seen, valued, and supported. One afternoon, as she was walking through the neighborhood on one of her daily strolls, Talia passed by one of the women from the health circle, an elderly lady named Claire. Claire was sitting on her front porch, watching the world go by. As Talia approached, Claire called out with a bright smile, "Talia, come sit with me for a moment." Talia paused and smiled. She was always in a hurry, always with a task to do or a place to go. But today, she felt a pull to slow down and take a seat next to Claire. She settled into the chair beside her, and for a few minutes, they simply sat in silence, enjoying each other's company. Finally, Claire spoke. "You know, Talia, I never thought I'd see the day when I'd be sitting on my porch just watching the world go by. It feels so good to be still." She paused, looking at Talia. "You've taught me that. You've taught me that it's okay to take a break, to breathe, to enjoy life as it comes." Talia felt a lump in her throat. She hadn't realized that her own journey had been so inspiring to others. She had been so focused on her own healing that she hadn't stopped to think about the impact she was having on those around her. "Thank you," Claire continued, "for reminding me that life is more than just surviving. It's about living, truly living." Talia smiled, her heart full. It was moments like these that made her realize how powerful her journey had been, not just for her, but for others. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living, and in doing so, she was giving others the courage to do the same. As the days passed, Talia continued to lead with this newfound sense of purpose. She embraced each day with a quiet confidence that was grounded in acceptance, connection, and the belief that her life had meaning beyond what she had ever imagined. By sharing her story and being there for others, Talia had found the true essence of health, living a life filled with love, vulnerability, and community. And that, she realized, was the greatest gift she could give, not just surviving, but living with an open heart, surrounded by the people she cared about most. It was early spring when Talia sat at her kitchen table, the soft sunlight streaming through the window, casting a warm glow over the room. The trees outside were beginning to bud, the air was fresh with the scent of blooming flowers, and Talia felt a profound sense of peace. She had come a long way since that fateful day in her garden, when dizziness and weakness had shaken her confidence. Now, as she sat there, she realized just how much had changed, not just in her physical health, but in her approach to life itself. Her journey had been one of transformation. She had faced the fear of vulnerability and embraced the necessity of self-care. She had learned the importance of slowing down, of taking moments to rest, and of being gentle with herself. And perhaps most importantly, she had learned that health wasn't just about avoiding illness or surviving a scare. It was about living intentionally, with a deep sense of connection to herself and the people around her. As Talia reflected on the past year, she realized that the most profound change had been in her mindset. For years, she had been driven by the need to achieve, to meet expectations, and to take care of everyone else. But the mini-stroke had forced her to pause and reevaluate everything. What was the point of achieving if you weren't present to enjoy the fruits of your labor? What was the point of taking care of everyone else if you didn't take care of yourself first? These questions had led Talia to a deeper understanding of what it meant to live fully. She had learned that life wasn't a series of tasks to check off. It was a series of moments to be experienced. And now, she was ready to embrace whatever came next. With an open heart and a newfound appreciation for the journey. It wasn't always easy. Some days, Talia still felt the pull of her old habits, the desire to do more, to achieve more, to be more. But now, when those feelings surfaced, she acknowledged them without judgment. She didn't push them away or fight against them. Instead, she reminded herself that it was okay to slow down, to rest, and to focus on what truly mattered: her health, her relationships, and her peace of mind. Lauren had noticed the change in her mother too. The conversations between them had deepened, moving beyond the surface-level exchanges that had once defined their relationship. Now, Talia and Lauren talked about life, love, and the importance of living authentically. They had always been close, but the bond between them had grown even stronger as they shared in Talia's transformation. One evening, as they sat on the porch together, Talia turned to Lauren with a smile. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice gentle. "I want to do something with the time I have left, not just for me, but for others too." Lauren looked at her mother, her eyes filled with curiosity. "What do you mean, Mom?" "I want to share what I've learned," Talia replied, her gaze thoughtful. "I want to show others that it's never too late to make a change, to find peace, to live fully. I've realized that there's so much more to life than what I thought, and I want to help others see that too." Lauren smiled, proud of her mother's decision. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Mom. You've always had a way of making people feel better, of bringing people together. This could be your next chapter." Talia nodded, her heart full of gratitude. She didn't know exactly what that next chapter would look like, but she felt a sense of purpose growing within her. It wasn't about grand plans or big achievements. It was about using her experience to help others. Whether that meant starting a small support group for seniors, writing a blog about her journey, or simply sharing her story in her community. The possibilities were endless, and Talia was ready to embrace them. As the days turned into weeks, Talia found herself more and more involved in local initiatives, offering support to others who were going through similar struggles. She connected with other seniors who, like her, had faced health scares and were seeking ways to improve their lives. It wasn't about being a guru or an expert, it was about being a guide, a gentle presence for those who needed it. One of the most rewarding aspects of this new chapter was seeing how her story resonated with others. Talia had always been a listener, a person who offered advice and support without expecting anything in return. But now, as she shared her own story of vulnerability, healing, and growth, she was surprised by the impact it had. She wasn't just helping others, she was empowering them to help themselves. Talia had come full circle. The woman who had once rushed through life, always striving and never resting, had learned to slow down and appreciate the beauty of each moment. The woman who had feared vulnerability had embraced it, finding strength in her ability to ask for help and share her journey. And the woman who had once seen health as a constant battle was now living in a way that honored both her body and her soul. The future was still uncertain, but Talia no longer feared it. She had learned that life wasn't about avoiding challenges, it was about how you faced them. With every step she took, Talia knew she was moving forward with confidence, guided by the wisdom of her experiences and the love of her family. As she looked out at the horizon, the sunset painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Talia felt a deep sense of peace. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living, and for the first time in a long time, she knew that everything she needed to live fully was already within her. Talia's journey over the past year has been nothing short of transformative. From the initial shock of her mini-stroke, she learned not only to care for her body, but also to nurture her spirit. The woman who once defined herself by her accomplishments and ability to take care of others now understands that true strength comes from embracing vulnerability and being present in each moment. Her shift from living a life dictated by tasks and expectations to one of mindful peace and connection with herself and others is a powerful reminder that healing is a holistic process, mind, body, and soul. But it's not just about avoiding illness, it's about learning to live fully. Talia found joy in the small moments, the walk in her neighborhood, the shared laughter with family, and the quiet time spent with friends. In sharing her journey, she's not just healing herself, she's inspiring others to embrace their own transformations, to slow down, and to prioritize what truly matters. As you reflect on Talia's story, think about your own life. Are you living for the future, always waiting for the next milestone? Or are you present in the now, taking time to care for yourself and connect with the people around you? Small changes can lead to profound shifts. Perhaps it's time to stop rushing and start embracing each moment with gratitude and intention. Remember, healing isn't about perfection, it's about progress, compassion, and learning to live with purpose. Talia's journey is a testament to the fact that it's never too late to make a change. And no matter where you are in life, you can always choose to live more fully.